May 30, 2024, Wenatchee, Washington. A mother waited at home. 3 plates sat untouched on the table. No reply from her ex-husband. But her daughter's phone still pinged deep in the woods. She called police. 48 hours later, search teams found a shallow trench in the forest. Inside 3 small bodies, zipped in bags, tied at the ankles. Not buried, just hidden. The father was gone. His phone off. His car abandoned. No goodbye. No explanation. Only the bodies and the silence. She had warned the court. She had begged for protection. But no one listened. Why didn't they? Why did every warning come too late? The case began on May 30, 2025, when 32-year-old Travis Decker arrived to pick up his 3 daughters. Peyton is 9 years old, Evelyn's 8 years old, and Olivia L's 5 years old. From their mother Whitney Decker, at her home in Wenatchee, Washington. It was a scheduled court-approved visitation, part of the custody arrangement following the couple's divorce. What started as an ordinary afternoon quickly spiraled into a 4-day nightmare. Travis failed to return the girls that evening, and Whitney's growing concern turned into panic. After multiple attempts to reach him failed, she contacted local police. On June 2, authorities made a horrifying discovery. The bodies of all 3 girls were found at a remote campsite in the Okanagan, Wenatchee National Forest, bound and suffocated. What began as a routine custody visit had now become a chilling triple homicide investigation. At approximately 5:30 p.m. on May 30, Travis Decker arrived at Whitney Decker's residence to pick up the children. Whitney later told investigators that the exchange appeared normal, although she sensed that Travis was quieter than usual. He drove off with the girls in his white GMC Sierra, license plate D2065C. From that point forward, no one outside the vehicle would see the children alive again. By 8 p.m., Whitney waited anxiously for their return. When there was no sign of Travis or the girls, she began calling his phone. There was no answer. As minutes turned to hours, her concern escalated into panic. At 9:45 p.m., she contacted the Wenatchee Police Department to report that her daughters had not been returned as scheduled. That same evening, she posted a plea for help on Facebook, writing, "Travis was supposed to bring the girls back at 8 p.m. last night and never showed up." This sudden breach of routine was not only troubling, it was unprecedented. Whitney described their co-parenting relationship as friendly, and noted that Travis rarely, if ever, violated court orders. The lack of communication and failure to return the girls sent up immediate red flags. Adding to the alarm was the existing custody order, which explicitly prohibited overnight stays due to Travis's unstable living conditions and mental health concerns. Whitney knew he was not authorized to keep the children beyond that evening, making his silence all the more ominous. From that moment, what should have been an ordinary visitation took a dark and uncertain turn. Wenatchee police began searching for Travis Decker and the 3 girls immediately after Whitney's report. However, their request to issue an Amber Alert was denied by the Washington State Patrol's WSP. According to WSP Public Affairs Director Chris Loftus, the case did not meet the strict criteria required for an Amber Alert to be activated. These include, Lies wonders the victim must be under 17 years old and believed to be abducted, and as tutor there must be credible evidence that the child is in serious physical danger or life-threatening peril. At that time, authorities noted there was no clear indication that Travis intended to harm the girls, and he still had partial legal custody rights. Instead, on May 31, WSP issued an Endangered Missing Person Alert, EMPA, which displayed messages on highway reader boards, but did not trigger push notifications to phones as an Amber Alert would. The EMPA included details about Travis's white GMC Sierra and his license plate, urging the public to keep an eye out for the vehicle. The delay in issuing a full-scale Amber Alert quickly became the center of public scrutiny. Whitney's attorney, Ariana Cozart, later criticized the decision, arguing that had the alert gone out immediately, it might have mobilized the community faster and drawn attention to Decker's vehicle before he had a chance to vanish into the wilderness. "Every minute matters when children are missing," she said, adding that the system's caution may have cost lives. In response to the criticism, the WSP maintained that they followed protocol based on the limited information available at the time. Nonetheless, they acknowledged the seriousness of the situation and expressed willingness to re-examine the Amber Alert criteria and their internal procedures. The case sparked renewed debate over how law enforcement balances caution with urgency in missing child cases, and whether current standards are truly adequate in high-risk domestic situations. Immediately after Whitney filed her report, the Wenatchee Police Department launched an active search for Travis Decker and the 3 girls. Officers canvassed motels and hotels across Wenatchee and East Wenatchee, hoping to locate the white GMC Sierra or any sign of the children. Despite extensive efforts, there were no initial leads. However, the flock surveillance camera system soon recorded Decker's vehicle heading westbound on U.S. Route 2 on May 30, pointing toward the Leavenworth area, a forested, mountainous region popular with campers and hikers. With growing concern, Wenatchee police coordinated with the FBI and the Chelan County Sheriff's Office to expand the search radius. On May 31, the Washington State Patrol issued an Endangered Missing Person Alert, EMPA, sharing details about Travis's vehicle across highway signs throughout central Washington. At the same time, specialized units, including the East Cascades SWAT team, the U.S. Forest Service, and agents from the Department of Homeland Security, joined the search. Helicopters were deployed to scan rugged areas near Leavenworth, while ground teams combed forest roads and backcountry trails. Investigators used cell phone data and license plate tracking to narrow their focus to the Rock Island campground. Located roughly 40 miles northwest of Wenatchee, the area was isolated and difficult to access, consistent with Decker's known comfort in remote environments. At approximately 3:45 p.m. on June 2, a Chelan County deputy located the abandoned GMC Sierra near Icicle Road, close to the Rock Island campground. Travis was not at the scene. As deputies began searching the surrounding woods, they made a devastating discovery: the bodies of Peyton S. 9 years old, Evelyn S. 8 years old, and Olivia S. 5 years old were found approximately 75 to 100 yards from the truck, down a small embankment in the forest. All 3 had been killed. The area was immediately secured as a crime scene. The Washington State Patrol's Major Crimes Unit was called in to process the site, collect evidence, and document the condition of the victims. The discovery confirmed the community's worst fears and marked the case's transition from a missing persons investigation to a triple homicide. The bodies of Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia were found approximately 75 to 100 yards from Travis Decker's abandoned white GMC Sierra. Their remains were discovered in a secluded patch of forest, just down a small embankment near the Rock Island campground. The location was heavily wooded, shielded from the road, and difficult to spot from a distance. An intentional choice, investigators believe, by someone familiar with wilderness terrain. Each girl had a plastic bag placed over her head, and investigators noted clear evidence that their wrists had been restrained with zip ties. Although some of the bindings had either broken or been removed by the time the bodies were found, the marks on their skin indicated they had been tied at some point before death. Scattered across the area were additional plastic bags, zip ties, and other personal items, strong indicators, according to court filings, that these materials were not randomly present, but deliberately used as tools in the commission of the crime. The gruesome nature of the scene deeply affected first responders. One deputy described it as devastating and methodical, citing the placement of the bodies and the presence of discarded restraints as signs of planning. There was no sign of a struggle in the immediate area, further suggesting the victims may have been subdued beforehand or taken by surprise. A preliminary autopsy conducted by the Chelan County Coroner's Office concluded that the official cause of death for all 3 girls was asphyxiation. The medical examiner confirmed this finding after further forensic analysis, and on June 9, 2025, the deaths were formally classified as homicides. Toxicology reports have not yet been publicly released, but no evidence has surfaced indicating the girls were drugged. The manner of death, suffocation by plastic bag, was ruled intentional and lethal, requiring force, opportunity, and proximity. Law enforcement officials believe the children were killed sometime between the evening of May 30 and the early hours of June 1. Cell phone data, vehicle location tracking, and the condition of the bodies all point to a narrow time frame. While the full timeline remains under investigation, authorities have suggested the location was selected in advance, possibly even scouted by Decker in the days before the abductions. The discovery of the girls' bodies was the emotional breaking point for the case, turning a desperate search into a confirmed tragedy. Grief rippled through the Wenatchee community and across the nation as images of the smiling sisters circulated online. The Rock Island campground, once a quiet retreat in the Okanogan, Wenatchee National Forest, is now remembered as the site of an unspeakable loss. And though the crime scene yielded valuable forensic evidence, it also left behind haunting questions about motive, mental state, and how a father once entrusted with their care could become the architect of such calculated violence. Travis Decker's white GMC Sierra truck, bearing Washington license plate D201C5C, was discovered abandoned near Rock Island Campground on the afternoon of June 2, 2025. The vehicle was found approximately 70 meters from where the bodies of Payden, Evelyn, and Olivia were later located. It was parked just off a narrow forest road near Usicle Creek. The truck was unlocked, with no visible signs of forced entry or recent use. Officers noted that there was no indication Travis had been present at the scene when law enforcement arrived. One of the most disturbing discoveries at the vehicle was a pair of blood-stained handprints on the tailgate. Preliminary forensic analysis identified one sample as male blood, possibly belonging to Travis Decker. However, DNA confirmation is still pending. The second sample of blood was confirmed to be non-human. Investigators believe it likely came from Travis's dog, Chinook, who was later found alive and in good health. There were no injuries on the dog, and no signs that it had been harmed, despite the presence of blood in the truck. The presence of these blood samples, one human, one animal, raised numerous questions about what occurred in or near the vehicle. It remains unclear whether the blood was from an accidental injury or part of the crime itself. The two bloody handprints on the tailgate have led some investigators to speculate that Travis may have been injured and leaned against the truck before fleeing the area. The truck and surrounding area were secured and processed by the Washington State Patrol's Crime Scene Unit for further forensic analysis. Near Travis Decker's abandoned truck, investigators found a small but organized campsite that quickly became a focal point in understanding the events leading up to the murders. A tent had been pitched close to the vehicle, showing clear signs of recent use. The ground around it was disturbed, with fresh footprints and overturned soil indicating movement within the previous 24 to 48 hours. Inside and around the tent, officers recovered several survival items, including sleeping bags, a lightweight blanket, foldable camping chairs, and a cooler containing food supplies. Among the contents were unopened jars and pouches of baby food, items clearly intended for young children. These findings indicated that the setup was not just for a few hours of outdoor activity, but reflected preparation for an extended stay in the forest. This stood in stark contrast to the terms of the custody arrangement, which only allowed for a brief daytime visit and strictly prohibited overnight stays due to Travis's unstable housing and mental health condition. Inside the truck, detectives discovered child car seats, additional blankets and cushions, and Travis's wallet, which remained untouched. The presence of the wallet, with cash, ID, and cards intact, effectively ruled out robbery as a motive. There were no signs of forced entry or theft, and nothing in the vehicle appeared to have been ransacked or hastily abandoned. Notably, the entire scene lacked signs of a sudden or chaotic struggle. There were no drag marks, no scattered belongings, and no signs of violence erupting in the moment. Everything appeared oddly methodical. Items were placed deliberately, and nothing seemed out of place. This orderliness led investigators to believe the killings may have been planned and executed in a controlled manner. The absence of blood at the campsite itself, combined with the clean setup, suggested that whatever had occurred happened with grim intent and disturbing calm. Together, the tent, the survival supplies, the personal belongings left behind, and the eerie tidiness of the area painted a chilling picture. It was not the scene of a desperate escape or a random act of violence. It was the scene of something prepared, quietly, carefully, and with devastating consequences. Chinook, the dog owned by Travis Decker, was found alive near the Rock Island campground, not far from the site where the bodies of Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia were discovered. The dog was unrestrained, uninjured, and in stable condition. Authorities transferred Chinook to a local animal protection facility, which has since declined to release further details due to the ongoing investigation. The survival of Chinook, unharmed and seemingly untouched, has raised unsettling questions. While Travis vanished without a trace and left behind the bodies of his 3 young daughters, he made the conscious choice to spare the family dog. This contrast has led many to wonder, why was the dog left alive when his children were not? Did Travis view the girls, his own flesh and blood, as somehow less deserving of protection than the animal he kept by his side? Some observers, including legal experts and psychologists, have pointed to this disturbing detail as evidence of emotional detachment or a complete psychological break. Others argue it may reflect a warped hierarchy of affection, in which Travis still cared for the dog but had lost empathy for his children. Whatever the reasoning, Chinook's survival stands as a painful and haunting symbol, suggesting that, in the final hours, the father may have shown more mercy to a pet than to the innocent daughters he was once trusted to love and protect. No suicide note or written message was found at the scene, eliminating the possibility that the crime was a spontaneous act followed by an intended suicide. The absence of any such documentation has made it difficult for investigators to understand Travis Decker's mindset or motivations in the hours leading up to the killings. In terms of murder weapons, no knives, firearms, or blunt objects were recovered at or near the campsite. The only items believed to have been used in the commission of the crime were plastic bags and zip ties, both found scattered around the area and linked directly to the manner of death: suffocation. This lack of conventional weapons has complicated the forensic investigation and left many procedural questions unanswered. There was also no physical evidence to suggest that Travis had harmed himself or attempted suicide at the scene. His blood was found on the tailgate of the truck, but the source and cause of the injury remain unclear. Additionally, the positioning of the girls' bodies, neatly placed under a slope, without drag marks or signs of struggle, indicates that they may have been carried and intentionally arranged. This further reinforces the theory that the act was deliberate, calculated, and disturbingly controlled. Phone records and GPS data revealed that Travis Decker had traveled to the Rock Island campground on May 29, 2025, one day before he picked up his daughters for the scheduled visitation. This finding has become a critical piece of the investigation, strongly suggesting that Decker selected and possibly prepared the remote location in advance. Authorities believe his early arrival points to a level of planning that goes beyond a spontaneous act. The setup of the campsite, complete with a tent, food supplies, and child-specific items, aligns with the theory that Decker intended to spend time there well before the girls arrived. However, his exact intentions remain unknown. What he did during those hours alone at the site is still under investigation, but the fact that he scouted the location beforehand has raised serious concerns about premeditation. Whether the visit on May 29 was part of a calculated plan or a desperate retreat into isolation, it adds another chilling layer to an already disturbing timeline. The scene at Rock Island campground revealed layers of quiet preparation, carefully arranged, deliberately concealed. Among the first things discovered was a fully assembled tent, surrounded by basic survival equipment, sleeping bags, folding chairs, a cooler filled with food, and child-specific items like unopened baby food. The presence of these items raised a haunting question. Had Travis Decker planned this site in advance as a hideout, Or was it intended from the beginning as the stage for something far more sinister? There were no signs of panic, no overturned gear, no broken equipment, and no scattered belongings. Everything was intact, orderly, even oddly peaceful. Why was there such a lack of disruption if the situation involved the murder of 3 young children? Could this calmness indicate that the actions were not done in haste or rage, but with precision and intent? Investigators also noted the absence of any struggle. No drag marks in the dirt. No broken branches nearby. No indications of resistance or last-minute attempts to flee. Were the girls ambushed in their sleep? Were they given false assurance by the person they trusted most? Adding to this disturbing picture was the amount and type of supplies found. The cooler held enough food for multiple days. There were blankets, a clean setup, and personal necessities, none of which appeared hastily thrown together. If Travis had only planned a few hours of visitation, why prepare for an extended stay? Did he intend to vanish into the forest afterward? Was this campsite meant to sustain him long after the act had been carried out? What's more, GPS data later showed that Travis had arrived at the area the day before he picked up his daughters. That detail casts a long shadow over the timeline. Why would he come here first, alone? Was he scouting the area, rehearsing the crime, or simply escaping in advance from the reality he knew he was about to destroy? Then there's the psychological question: why construct such an elaborate, quiet space only to commit a violent act within it? Was this location a twisted version of peace for him? Did he choose it because it reminded him of the military terrain he once trained in? Or did he feel a sense of safety in the forest that he couldn't find anywhere else? These questions now echo in the silence he left behind, unanswered, but impossible to ignore. Before the manhunt, before the heartbreak, before the headlines, Travis Decker was just a name on a list, a man with a past that now demands to be unraveled. To understand how we got here, we have to look back, not just at what he did, but at who he was. Travis Caleb Decker, 32 years old, is a former U.S. Army infantryman whose background paints the picture of a man shaped by discipline, physical endurance, and eventual unraveling. He enlisted in the military in 2013, serving 8 years before transitioning to the Washington National Guard in 2021. During his active duty, Travis deployed to Afghanistan in 2014, gaining combat experience in a region that has left psychological scars on many soldiers. He also received specialized training in mountain survival, a skill set that now makes him an exceptionally difficult fugitive to track. Authorities believe he is capable of surviving for extended periods in the wilderness with minimal supplies, a dangerous advantage in a manhunt that has already spanned hundreds of square miles. Decker's early life gave few indications of what he would later become. He was a graduate of Pewaukee High School in Wisconsin, where he was known more for his grit on the wrestling mat than any sign of mental instability. A standout athlete, Travis competed at the state level and reached the finals of the 2010 Wisconsin State Wrestling Championships, an early testament to his strength, stamina, and determination. Former classmates described him as quiet but focused, someone who followed rules and kept to himself. These qualities made him well suited for military life. But somewhere along the way, something changed. By the time of his discharge, Travis Decker was no longer the promising young soldier from Pewaukee. His personal life had begun to fracture. He suffered from untreated mental health conditions, including a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. He struggled to hold steady employment and was often homeless, rotating between shelters, campgrounds, and low-cost motels in Washington state. He lost his permanent residence and eventually regular access to his 3 daughters due to safety concerns related to his living conditions and declining mental state. The profile that emerges is one of a man trained to survive, but unable to function in society. He had the technical skills to endure physical hardship, but lacked the stability and support systems to manage civilian life. Despite warnings from his ex-wife and changes to their custody agreement, the system failed to account for the risk he posed, not just to himself, but to his own children. Now, As a suspect in one of the most chilling child murder cases in recent Washington history, every detail of his past is being re-examined. The soldier, the athlete, the father, and the fugitive. What signs were missed? What could have been done differently? These are not just questions for investigators. They are questions for all of us. According to court documents, Whitney Decker disclosed that her ex-husband, Travis Decker, was officially diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, BPD, near the end of their 7-year marriage. BPD is a serious mental health condition marked by intense emotional instability, unpredictable mood swings, and impulsive behaviors. The Cleveland Clinic describes it as a disorder that disrupts interpersonal relationships and impairs decision-making, often leading to extreme reactions and difficulties in maintaining stability. Whitney told the court that Travis had refused to take prescribed medication to manage his symptoms. Without treatment, she believed his condition had deteriorated over time, contributing to episodes of irrational anger, detachment, and paranoia. These episodes reportedly worsened after his military service and as his housing situation became more unstable. Although Travis had moments of affection and deep attachment to his children, Whitney said his emotional volatility made her increasingly fearful. She stated that his unpredictable behavior, not rooted in violence, but in disconnection and disorientation, was a growing concern. The lack of consistent psychiatric care, combined with his isolation, left Travis untethered from reality. This psychological decline, Whitney warned, posed a silent but escalating threat to those closest to him. Despite his diagnosis, Travis Decker repeatedly declined treatment and refused to engage with any mental health support programs, including those specifically designed for veterans. His ex-wife's attorney, Ariana Cozart, revealed that Travis had reached out to a national veterans crisis hotline at one point, but ultimately received no meaningful assistance. Whether this was due to bureaucratic delays, limited resources, or his own inability to follow through remains unclear. The lack of intervention raised serious concerns about his mental stability in the weeks and months leading up to the tragedy. Without therapeutic guidance or medication, Travis was left to navigate his psychological distress alone. His untreated symptoms, combined with increasing isolation and homelessness, formed a dangerous pattern of decline. Whitney's attorney, Ariana Cozart, emphasized that mental health support systems failed him, not just in terms of availability, but in outreach and follow-up. She argued that someone with his history of trauma, instability, and documented diagnosis should not have been left without structured care. This absence of oversight, she warned, may have contributed to a total loss of behavioral control, setting the stage for what would become an unthinkable act. At the time of the crime, Travis Decker was unemployed and believed to be homeless. He was reportedly living out of his white GMC Sierra pickup truck, occasionally staying in motels or camping in remote areas around Wenatchee, Washington. This unstable living situation had persisted for months. Court records show that Travis's financial hardship played a direct role in restricting his parental rights. A judge modified the custody agreement to prohibit overnight visits with his daughters, citing concerns about safety, hygiene, and emotional well-being. Whitney Decker, his ex-wife, testified that the children often appeared distressed after spending time with him in unpredictable environments. Despite the court order, Travis continued to push back against the limitations. He refused to sign the updated parenting plan and showed little interest in securing stable housing. His downward spiral, from a veteran with survival training to a father sleeping in his truck, illustrated how untreated mental illness and financial collapse intersected in tragic, irreversible ways. Travis and Whitney Decker finalized their divorce in 2023, with Whitney granted primary custody of their 3 daughters. Under the original custody agreement, Travis was allowed unsupervised visitation every other weekend, and there were no major restrictions placed on his parenting time. However, as his mental health deteriorated and his housing situation became increasingly unstable, concerns began to grow. By mid-2024, Whitney filed a petition to modify the custody terms, citing Travis's homelessness, erratic behavior, and failure to follow medical recommendations for his mental health. She argued that overnight visits were no longer safe and that their daughters needed stability and protection. During a September 2024 hearing, Whitney requested that Travis be stripped of overnight custody and that she retain sole decision-making authority regarding the children's education and medical care. Judge Robert Jordan granted the modification. Travis's visitation was reduced to a few daytime hours and restricted to within the Wenatchee area. The ruling reflected the court's concern about both the physical and emotional safety of the children. While Travis retained limited access to his daughters, the decision marked a turning point, one where the legal system formally acknowledged that his presence in their lives needed to be carefully controlled for their well-being. Digital evidence retrieved from Travis Decker's phone revealed that he had visited the Rock Island campground on May 29, one day before he picked up his daughters. In addition to his location history, Travis's Google search records raised further alarm. Days before the incident, he looked up terms like "immigrate to Canada," "how to move to Canada," and "jobs in Canada." These searches, detailed in U.S. Marshals Service documents, have fueled speculation that Travis was considering fleeing the country in the aftermath of the crime. Given the proximity of Washington state to the Canadian border and his military background in navigation and wilderness survival, investigators believe Decker may have formulated an escape plan. Some theorize he may have stashed supplies along potential routes leading north. While no definitive proof has confirmed his attempt to cross into Canada, the combination of digital breadcrumbs and his disappearance has made international escape a real and troubling possibility for law enforcement. Although Whitney Decker described her co-parenting relationship with Travis as cordial and reported no major incidents during previous visits, several details from court records and neighbor accounts point to earlier signs of instability. A neighbor told the Daily Mail that Travis appeared distant and sad. When he arrived to pick up the girls on May 30, he reportedly repeated the same question during a brief conversation, as if unaware he had already asked it, raising subtle but disturbing concerns about his mental clarity. Further troubling behavior is documented in family court records. In one earlier incident, Travis allowed the children to sleep overnight at a National Guard facility where he was staying, surrounded by multiple adult men. During that visit, one of the girls was reportedly injured while playing with gym equipment left unattended in the building. This event, combined with Whitney's ongoing concerns about his living conditions, played a key role in the court's decision to restrict his custody. While there was no formal allegation of abuse, these incidents suggest a pattern of poor judgment and cognitive disorganization, warning signs that, in hindsight, may have foreshadowed the much darker outcome that would follow. The evidence doesn't suggest chaos, it reveals control. Travis Decker didn't just vanish, he executed a carefully staged disappearance. No phone pings, no bank activity, no mistakes. The survival gear wasn't scattered, it was positioned. The silence wasn't panic, it was strategy. From his digital wipeout to the way he left the scene, every detail points to a man who didn't just plan a crime, he planned the aftermath. This wasn't a man on the run. This was a man who intended never to be found. Based on current evidence, the most plausible scenario is that Travis Decker not only carried out the murders of his 3 daughters, but did so with deliberate premeditation and a calculated escape plan. Multiple data points, both digital and physical, suggest a methodical pattern of behavior in the days leading up to the crime. First, GPS records from Travis's cell phone confirm that he traveled to the Rock Island campground on May 29, one day before picking up his daughters for a scheduled custody visit. This detail alone implies forethought. Under normal circumstances, his visitation was restricted to a few supervised hours in Wenatchee, with no permission for overnight stays. Yet he drove 70 miles into the wilderness, to an isolated campsite in Okanogan, Wenatchee National Forest, a place difficult to access and easy to disappear from. Second, when investigators arrived at the scene, they discovered a tent, sleeping bags, a cooler, and jars of baby food. These weren't casual picnic items or supplies for a short afternoon. They were provisions for an extended stay. Car seats were also found, along with other personal belongings that would typically accompany a parent planning to care for children over several days. The presence of these items suggests not spontaneity, but intent. Travis knew he would have the girls longer than allowed, and he prepared for it. The most chilling detail, however, is what didn't happen after May 30. Travis vanished. He made no phone calls. He didn't use his debit card. There were no ATM withdrawals, no GPS pings, and no known sightings. It's as if he slipped through the cracks of modern surveillance. And that's exactly what someone trained in evasion would try to do. Travis Decker was not an ordinary man. As a former Army infantryman and National Guard member, he had undergone survival training at a mountain warfare school. He was intimately familiar with rugged terrain and how to move through it without being detected. For someone like Travis, the deep woods of Washington wouldn't be a barrier. They would be cover. Further reinforcing the theory of premeditation is his digital history. In the days before the crime, Travis searched for terms like "how to move to Canada" and "Canada job opportunities." These weren't aimless searches. They were possible blueprints for a life on the run. The Rock Island campsite, located less than 200 miles from the Canadian border, sits within striking distance of the Pacific Crest Trail, a wilderness route that could be used to cross into British Columbia undetected. Blood evidence found on the tailgate of Travis's white GMC Sierra also complicates the scene. While DNA results are still pending, initial reports suggest the blood came from a male, likely Travis himself. Whether self-inflicted or the result of a struggle, the presence of blood could have served a dual purpose: evidence of a scuffle or a psychological misdirection to suggest trauma or suicide. Either way, it adds to the suspicion that the crime scene was, at least in part, constructed to delay investigators. This theory gains further weight from the behavior of law enforcement. Over 100 officers, helicopters, K-9 units, SWAT teams, and National Guard aircraft have been deployed since June 2. Yet, as of mid-June, Travis remains missing. Authorities have scaled back wide area searches, instead focusing on narrower zones like the Blewett Pass and Ingalls Creek areas. Items of interest and fresh footprints have been discovered, but Decker continues to elude capture. That level of disappearance is not luck, it's survival strategy. Some investigators now suspect the campsite itself was staged. The inclusion of baby food, car seats, and other child-oriented items may have been designed to suggest he intended to stay put, when in fact, he was already long gone. The question remains, was this a man trying to vanish into the trees, or into another country? If Travis Decker is still alive, he may be hiding somewhere along the vast wilderness corridors of Washington, using military tactics to stay ahead of the search. Alternatively, if he reached the Canadian border before law enforcement could tighten their perimeter, he may already be out of the United States, living under a false identity or simply surviving deep in the wild. In either case, the emerging narrative is not one of chaos, but of chilling deliberation. Travis didn't just disappear. He orchestrated an exit. He knew how to survive, and more disturbingly, he knew how to vanish. While most evidence points toward Travis Decker as the perpetrator in the deaths of his 3 daughters, an alternate theory, less explored but not implausible, suggests that he may have also become a victim. Nearly 2 weeks since the discovery of the children's bodies, there is still no confirmed trace of Travis Decker. The possibility that he died, either by suicide or at the hands of a third party, remains open. One of the key pieces of forensic evidence is a blood sample found on the tailgate of Decker's white GMC Sierra. Although authorities have stated it likely belongs to an adult male, DNA confirmation has not yet been made public. If the blood turns out not to be Travis's, it raises serious questions. Whose blood is it? And why was it found at the scene? If it is his, the amount and location could indicate a self-inflicted injury, or a violent encounter that never resolved with a known outcome. Adding to the mystery is the complete lack of life signs after June 2. Since the bodies of Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia Decker were discovered, there has been no phone activity, no credit or debit card usage, and no verified sightings of Travis anywhere in Washington state or beyond. For someone who had survival training and military experience, it's unusual, even for a fugitive, to leave absolutely no trace for nearly 2 weeks. In fact, one of the few physical leads investigators have, a set of footprints believed to be Travis's, found near Ingalls Creek, ended abruptly. The trail simply stopped, with no continuation into another area or transition into another trackable path. Law enforcement has not ruled out the possibility that the terrain obscured further signs, but the sudden disappearance of the trail has fueled speculation that Travis may have succumbed to the elements, or to something more sinister. Travis's mental health is another critical factor to consider. Diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and showing signs of cognitive decline, including repetitive questioning and emotional withdrawal, Travis was reportedly in a fragile psychological state. One neighbor described him as appearing confused and distant during the last known interaction on May 30. His behavior was consistent with someone under immense emotional strain. Given these factors, it is reasonable to explore the possibility that Travis took his own life in the aftermath of the murders, or even as a direct reaction to them. In cases of familicide, suicide is not uncommon. However, no weapon has been found, and no note or indication of suicidal intent has been discovered at the scene. Still, the vastness and complexity of the forested area, particularly around the Pacific Crest Trail and Blewett Pass, means a body could remain hidden for weeks, even months, before being discovered. Another angle, though speculative, is the potential involvement of a third party. Could Travis have been attacked by someone after the children's deaths? Could the crime scene have been misinterpreted or manipulated by someone else? While there's currently no evidence pointing to another suspect, law enforcement has not entirely ruled out the possibility. In such remote terrain, with unpredictable weather and hundreds of square miles to cover, many outcomes remain within the realm of possibility. This theory, Travis as a secondary victim, has not received as much attention in media coverage, likely because the brutality of the children's deaths and Travis's military background present a more compelling fugitive narrative. But with no confirmed sightings, no recovered body, and limited physical evidence tying him definitively to the murders, this hypothesis cannot be entirely dismissed. In a case already filled with uncertainty and unanswered questions, one possibility remains largely unexplored in public discourse: the presence of a third party. While most theories place Travis Decker at the center of the crime, either as the killer or a potential suicide victim, certain elements of the investigation leave room for an even more complex scenario, one involving someone else entirely. The location of the crime scene is the first red flag. Rock Island Campground sits deep within the Okanogan, Wenatchee National Forest, in proximity to the Pacific Crest Trail, a 2,650-mile wilderness corridor that stretches from the Mexican border to Canada. This is not a casual camping destination. It's remote, rugged, and accessible primarily to those with survival experience. That alone expands the pool of possible suspects beyond Decker. Anyone with similar military or wilderness training could have entered or exited the scene without detection. More importantly, the crime scene itself displayed unusual cleanliness. Investigators noted a lack of struggle, no overturned items, no signs of panic, no damage to the campsite. Even more striking was the absence of audible distress. There were no reports of screams, no calls for help, and no noise complaints from nearby campers, which is uncommon in cases involving violence. This eerie silence has led some to speculate that the crime may have been executed with a level of control and precision beyond what one mentally unstable individual could achieve alone. Another layer of intrigue lies in Travis Decker's background. As a veteran of the U.S. Army and a member of the Washington National Guard, Decker moved in circles that included others with tactical knowledge, field training, and access to remote locations. It's not unreasonable to consider that he may have known someone capable of planning or executing such a crime, and perhaps willing to assist or betray him. One theory suggests that Travis may not have committed the killings himself, but rather brought the children to the campsite unaware of the danger. In this version, a third party, possibly someone he trusted, may have taken control of the situation and carried out the murders while either manipulating or overpowering Travis. His subsequent disappearance could then be explained as a cover-up or even a second crime, with Travis becoming another victim. An alternative theory holds that Travis may have had a partner in planning the incident, but something went wrong. A dispute, a betrayal, or a panic response could have led the alleged accomplice to turn on him. The male blood found on the tailgate of his truck, still unconfirmed to be Travis's, could belong to someone else entirely, someone who was injured during a confrontation and then disappeared. Without DNA results, that question remains unresolved. Skeptics may argue that the third-party theory lacks hard evidence. And they're right. So far, there's no surveillance footage, no witness accounts, and no recovered communications suggesting the involvement of another person. But in a wilderness crime scene with minimal digital footprints, the absence of evidence does not equate to the absence of involvement. Until Travis Decker is found, alive or dead, all theories remain on the table. And if a third party was involved, they may still be out there, unaccounted for, and unnoticed. In that case, this tragedy might not be the end of a story. It could be the beginning of a much wider investigation. Travis Caleb Decker, 32 years old, is currently the subject of an intensive multi-agency manhunt following the deaths of his 3 daughters, Payton Decker, 9 years old, Evelyn Decker, 8 years old, and Olivia Decker, 5 years old, whose bodies were discovered on June 2 at a remote campsite near Rock Island in Washington state. In the wake of this discovery, Decker was officially charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of first-degree kidnapping, and a federal charge of unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. The arrest warrant spans both state and federal jurisdictions, triggering an expansive response that now involves the Chelan County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, the U.S. Marshals Service, and U.S. Border Patrol. Decker's fugitive status has been classified as high risk, and law enforcement has issued strong warnings to the public to not approach. Authorities have labeled him dangerous and potentially armed, urging citizens to call 911 or the Chelan County Sheriff's Office tip line at 529-667-60-45 if they spot him. A reward of $2,000 has been offered for information leading to his arrest. Physically, Decker is described as 5,008 feet, weighing approximately 190 pounds, with black hair, long enough to be pulled back into a ponytail, and brown eyes. He is a U.S. Army veteran with deployment experience in Afghanistan and extensive training in wilderness survival. Law enforcement believes he may be using those skills to evade capture in the rugged backcountry of Washington state, possibly using pre-staged gear or untraceable routes. With his last known location being near the Pacific Crest Trail and Canadian border, authorities have not ruled out the possibility that he is attempting to flee the country. The scale of the manhunt reflects both the gravity of the crime and the challenge posed by Decker's military background. Since June 2, the search effort has grown to include specialized teams from multiple counties, Chelan, Catitas, Douglas, and Okanagan, along with aerial surveillance provided by the Washington National Guard. Helicopters, drones, K-9 units, and ground teams have all been deployed. On June 4, law enforcement temporarily closed a portion of the Okanagan, Wenatchee National Forest to civilian access, allowing search crews to operate without obstruction. The closure lasted until June 8, but patrols and surveillance continue in key regions, including Blewett Pass, Ingalls Creek, and the Valley High area. The U.S. Marshals have also activated their Rapid Advancement Manhunt Program, RAMP, a federal initiative that pools national resources to locate fugitives deemed especially elusive or dangerous. Chief Jerome Brown of the U.S. Marshals Service noted that RAMP is designed to bring in additional intelligence, tactical support, and financial resources to assist local and state agencies in cases like this. Despite the massive scale of the operation and multiple reported sightings, Travis Decker remains at large. His absence has only deepened the trauma felt by the community and intensified the urgency of the investigation. Law enforcement officials have reiterated that they are committed to pursuing all leads and will not stop until Decker is located and brought to justice. Whitney Decker's silence speaks louder than any public statement ever could. She has not appeared on camera. She has not given interviews, nor posted on social media. And yet, her absence is not indifference. It is agony in its most restrained form. According to her attorney, Ariana Cozart, Whitney's silence is the loudest cry. And that phrase captures a kind of grief that defies language. Losing one child is unthinkable. Losing 3 in one day is not just grief, it is a full-body collapse of meaning. Whitney is not just mourning her daughters, Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia. She is mourning the rhythm of her days, the sound of their voices, the future that died with them. In trauma psychology, this is known as complicated grief, where the trauma is so immense that the mind retreats from it as a defense mechanism. To speak would mean to acknowledge. To cry in public would mean to accept. And some realities are too brutal to let in. She is still breathing, but inside, something has gone still. Whitney's silence is not passive. It is survival. And sometimes, survival is the most painful form of strength. Amy Edwards is not just a spokesperson. She is a lifeline. In the aftermath of unspeakable loss, she has become the only thread connecting Whitney Decker to a world that continues to spin without her children. At press conferences, Amy doesn't deliver prepared statements or legal updates. She speaks from the heart, with a voice that trembles under the weight of witnessing a mother's complete collapse. Her words are not explanations. They are placeholders for the silence Whitney cannot yet break. When Amy says, "Whitney is in too much pain for words," it's not a metaphor. It's a raw truth. Grief this deep cannot always speak for itself, so it borrows the voice of a friend. Amy stands in the wreckage, not just to speak, but to feel publicly what Whitney cannot bear to show. She does not dilute the anguish. She carries it, holds it up to the light, and demands that the world look. Wenatchee didn't need to shout to be heard. In a town of fewer than 35,000 people, grief spread not like fire, but like fog, quiet, heavy, inescapable. The community didn't march, they didn't chant. Instead, they gathered in silence at Wenatchee Memorial Park on the evening of June 3, clutching candles, placing flowers, and standing beneath fading light with photos of 3 little girls who once danced, acted, and played on local stages and fields. Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia weren't just names. They were the town's laughter, movement, and music. There were no microphones, no speeches, only presence. And in that quiet, something profound unfolded. It was collective mourning without performance. No one tried to explain the unexplainable. The silence wasn't avoidance, it was reverence. Wenatchee grieved not just for the girls, but with Whitney. This case didn't just shake the quiet town of Wenatchee. It sent shockwaves across the entire state of Washington. On June 13, 2025, the steps of Seattle City Hall Plaza became a place of reckoning. Lawmakers, child safety advocates, and grieving parents gathered, not to assign blame, but to demand change. Among them was Kathy Sherlock, a mother who knows this pain too intimately. Her daughter, Caden Mancuso, was killed by her father during a court-ordered visitation, an eerily similar tragedy that occurred years earlier in Pennsylvania. Sherlock, voice trembling, stood not just in grief, but in solidarity. She spoke of the haunting parallels between her daughter's case and that of Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia Decker. "I feel guilty," she admitted, "because Caden's law hasn't been adopted in Washington yet." The federal legislation, passed in 2022, was designed to improve judicial training around domestic violence. Something that, had it been in place, may have changed the course of these girls' lives. But the gathering wasn't just a memorial. It was a plea, a demand, a call to examine how family courts weigh risk and how the Amber Alert system is deployed in custody cases involving mental health and violence. Candles and flowers gave way to clipboards and policy briefs. This wasn't political theater. It was lived urgency, and the message was painfully clear: no child should die because the system hesitated. The GoFundMe campaign launched by Amy Edwards on behalf of Whitney Decker became something far greater than a fundraiser. It became a movement of collective mourning and compassion. By June 15, more than 25,000 people had contributed, raising over $1.2 million. The donations didn't come just from Wenatchee, but from strangers across the country and across oceans, many of whom had never met Whitney or her daughters. No one was pressured. No one was prompted by a viral video or a celebrity endorsement. People gave quietly, a few dollars, a message of love, a whispered prayer. What united them wasn't pity, but a shared refusal to let a mother grieve alone. The scale of the response revealed something powerful. Grief this deep crosses borders, and so does empathy. On the campaign page, Amy wrote, "When one mother cries, we all cry." That simple sentence became a chorus. Thousands echoed it, not with speeches, but with action. In a world often overwhelmed by cruelty and distance, this wave of giving reminded us that even in the darkest moments, compassion still knows how to find its way home. Whitney's tragedy is not just the story of one family. It is an indictment of a system that failed to act in time. She did everything a mother could. She raised concerns. She documented instability. She pleaded with the court to limit Travis's custody rights due to his mental health. But warning signs turned into paperwork, and paperwork turned into silence. No one moved fast enough. No one acted boldly enough. And now, 3 children are gone. When a mother loses everything despite sounding the alarm, it signals a fracture in the very systems meant to protect our most vulnerable. The courts hesitated. The warnings were softened. And the result is irreversible. Whitney's loss forces us to confront an uncomfortable question: where were we when Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia needed us most? Not just as a legal system or a police force, but as a society. The answer is not in what we say now, it's in what we failed to do then. And if we don't listen, this will happen again. Because tragedies like this don't just break families, they break public trust. As of June 15, 2025, Travis Decker remains at large. The federal warrant, charging him with murder, kidnapping, and unlawful flight, still stands. He may be deep in the Washington wilderness, across the Canadian border, or already dead. But regardless of where Travis is, one devastating fact remains unchanged: Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia are gone. Justice, if it exists at all, doesn't hinge on whether Travis is caught. It lies in the harder question: whether this tragedy could have been prevented. And the painful answer is, it could have been. Whitney Decker had warned the system. She raised concerns about Travis's declining mental health, his refusal to seek treatment, his homelessness. The court recognized the danger and removed his overnight custody rights. Police were informed of troubling behavior, like Travis keeping the girls in unsafe environments. Yet none of these red flags translated into decisive protection. The legal system saw the signs, but failed to act with urgency, seemingly unwilling to place child safety above a father's custody privileges. At the heart of this failure lies a dangerous assumption: that a father, no matter how unstable, won't harm his own children. It's a comforting idea, but in this case, it became a fatal one. The system's hesitation, its deference to parental bonds, left 3 girls unprotected and voiceless. They didn't understand court orders or custody limitations. They couldn't say no to that final trip, and no one in the system spoke on their behalf loudly enough. The lesson here is harsh but necessary: trust in family instinct must never override timely vigilance and action. What happened in Wenatchee isn't just one family's heartbreak, it's a national reckoning. And until we acknowledge that, nothing changes. No policy, no law, no child's fate. Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia deserved more than grief after the fact. They deserved a system that would have fought for them before it was too late. If a father can vanish with his 3 daughters, and none of them ever come home, who are we supposed to trust? If a mother cries out for help, and no one hears her, who will speak up next time? And if justice only arrives after death, does it still mean anything at all? These aren't questions with easy answers. They are the legacy Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia leave behind. A haunting reminder that we must do better. Not someday. Not after the fact. Now. Because the children who needed protection the most no longer have the chance to ask for it themselves.